come once again to discuss things.
Yeah.
Is it a bad movie?
No, I think it's like a forgotten classic.
Okay, don't tell me yet. I want to be surprised. You guys ready to go ahead and get started, though? Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part 2. Joining me today is Mr. Steve Baxi and Rasco of Rasco's Modern Life. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello.
And hello, audience members listening to this. And guess what? If you're listening to this on YouTube, but you have someplace to be, well, there's a link in the description that you should go check out, so you can download the audio for this episode and listen on the go on your cellular phone, mobile device, whatever you got. Old episodes of Geeky Gentlemen can also be uploaded by request. There's a Geeky Gentlemen playlist. Search that, find an episode that you think you want to listen to, leave a comment below on it, and I will upload it for you, and you can download it that way. We've got over 300 episodes. I've gotten a lot of new subscribers over the last couple days thanks to the kind words of the dearly departed channel Bad Guy, so thank you very much for that. Steve, you probably noticed a bit of an uptick in subscribers too.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, he gave you a shout out as well. In any case, so yes, Channel Bad Guy, we're very thankful for the shout out, the last dying words of a good man, in a certain manner of speaking. In any case, this week on Geeky Gentlemen, though, we are discussing short form versus long form storytelling in comic books. So this should be interesting, because I know where I stand, I talk about it all the time. Got a pretty good idea of where Steve stands. I don't think Rasco reads enough comics to count.
But I'm gonna throw some crazy things out there.
Certainly.
I'm gonna go full Trump mode.
Yeah, just don't have any idea what you're talking about, but act supremely confident. It's a good way to get through life.
I know more than the generals, Ian.
Yeah. Okay, well then, since you know so much, Rasco...
No, I don't want to go first. I refuse to go first.
No, you're going first.
No, I'm not. I can't go first.
No, you have to go first. Rasco, I do want you to go first since you have the least experience. When you are reading a comic book, just a single standard 22-page comic book, which do you think you'd prefer? Something that is like introducing or continuing more of an arc-based story, or something that is purely self-contained within that issue?
I think that, I would say I like a larger arc-based story, and it's weird because I feel like my favorite, I like a very, complete, but at the same time, somewhat lengthy narrative. So that's why I like movies, I think, are such a sweet spot. They're right at the point where you can feel at the end of a movie like you've invested enough time into it to be there emotionally. So a comic, that's much shorter, but I would much rather read a longer form story that adds up to the amount of plot that you would get from a season of a Netflix show or something like that.
Gotcha. And just out of curiosity, how many single issue comics have you read compared to collected stories in trade?
I almost always buy things in trade.
Gotcha. Steve, where do you stand on this? Short form, long form, which is your preference?
Usually I'd like to say it just depends on the material. Sometimes a single issue can be more impactful than an entire run, just depending on what you're reading, but I've always been more of a trade person. I've always been more of a TV show person. I like long form more. When I think about all my favorite written works, single issues are up there, movies are up there, but my favorite things tend to be big, long, complete journeys, like all 5 seasons of Angel, or the entire Dennis O'Neil Iron Man run, the entire Grant Morrison Batman run.
Or like a trilogy of films.
Or like a trilogy of movies. Yeah, like I like going on like these longer journeys where things have the ability to decompress. I think that's partly why I like stuff like the Marvel Cinematic Universe as much as I do, is because it's about the fact that this is a narrative that keeps going, and we just like crisscross into different pockets, but overall it's always going in one particular direction.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. And I'm not surprised by that answer at all. Like, Steve always talks about everything in arcs. He always has these like long conversations about why this arc affects the next arc, but you like step back and you realize he's talking about like 20 years of fucking comic book history at that point. And it's like, Steve, I don't think they put that much thought into it. I think it just worked out that way.
I mean, this very thing came up today where like someone sent me a link to like, hey, here's a revelation about who Tony Stark's real parents are. I'm like, great. I don't care, because the 60 years of Iron Man I like talking about is where he is his father's son.
Yep. Well, for me, I talk about this on comic reviews all the time. It's such a weird thing because I acknowledge that everyone is essentially writing for trade or even writing for omnibuy at this point. Not just omnibus, but omnibuy. They want multiple volumes, right?
Doing that Jonathan Hickman style.
Yeah. Like, I acknowledge that everyone's writing for that, and ultimately, I am much more on the side of I prefer short, one-and-done stories now, because I've just gotten so exhausted with these gigantic runs. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that some of these gigantic runs aren't fucking amazing. It's just so damn exhausting to try to like do the mental gymnastics to keep up with it month to month. And I feel like we should just either go to releasing the volume without releasing it in singles, so we don't have to meet, monthly demands and stuff, so you can have more time to craft the story or craft the art, so you don't have to change artists. Or we should do more stuff that, is just single issue, one and done stories, or short arcs in the monthly comic format. My ideal is, of course, for them to do stuff that's, kind of an in-between, where there are longer arcs, but there are issues in between that can just be read on their own, where there's stuff that stands alone within the longer arc. That's my ideal. That's how Sandman was written. That's how Grant Morrison's 18 Days is being written, and that's the way I enjoy to read comics, where it's like, yeah, we have these longer arc-based things that require the mental gymnastics of remembering every goddamn tiny little detail in every goddamn comic book panel along the way. But every so often we just get a single issue that stands on its own, and it's beautiful. That's my preference. I
feel like over the past 10, 15 years, we've sort of lost how to balance that. Like when we go back to good classic 70s, 80s Marvel and DC, I can very easily point to like 30, 40, 60 issue runs, but all of those runs always had like those lulls in the middle. Like Dennis O'Neill's Iron Man isn't like one through line for every single issue. Like at least 50% of those issues are one and done stories.
Yeah.
And it's really bizarre to me to do this notion. Like, even Grant Morrison's Batman has this in places, but, like, it's really bizarre to me to do this thing of, like, everything you're doing has to be in almost seasonal television format. So, like, one run has, like, 5 arcs, but each arc is, like, a year's worth of stories where nothing else is happening. I don't understand. Like the big appeal of longer runs to me is you get to see the evolution of a status quo. But recently, all we kind of do is we keep every arc is like a year's worth of breaking status quos, and that just feels less genuine to me. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, I love Jeff Johns' Green Lantern, but you've read that, Steve. There's very little standalone, one-and-done stories in it.
Yeah. Every now and then he does something, we just, like, give Hal a breather, but it's always a matter of, like, here's a side note.
Yeah, and I mean, there's breaks in universe, but not in what you're reading.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's such a crazy thing because I just feel like that's... Raska, you're the one that doesn't read comics on a regular basis here. Do you feel that even though you're the person you're the kind of person that prefers a longer, more arc-based story, do you feel that like that approach to comics alienates you from reading current comics?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Current, definitely. I thought you were going to say just in general, but yeah, that's what it is, really, for me. I just don't want to even bother with current. That's why anything I always buy would be in trade.
Yeah, it's like, that's what occurs to me. It's a very alienating problem. How is anyone... because that's why I was kind of iffy on getting into comics in the first place. Keep in mind, I didn't start reading comics till I was 15, 16. I didn't get into comics in the first place because it's like, oh, well, don't you have to know, like, everything that's been going on for, like, 20 years to be able to understand any of it? And that's not a no answer to that question, but it's also not a yes, right? Like, you hear someone ask a question like that, and you want to say, no, you don't have to know everything for the last 20 years, just for the last 10 and a half. Unless you're DC, then just wait like a year and a half, and then they'll reboot, and it'll be a whole thing. I imagine the DC universe is a computer that's starting to act up, and so they just press the reset button on it every couple minutes.
Reboot.
Yep. Just, god damn it. Printer won't work.
At some point, we'll run out of RE words to tack onto DC things.
Right?
They just have to go down like the list of dictionary terms and just like
Reboot,
everything comes out.
Restart, rebirth, reinitiate, reengage. At some point, we'll run out.
Reinvigorate.
Reinstate.
Revitalize.
Readjust.
Course correction.
Yeah, exactly.
Reaction. DC reaction.
That's exactly what we have right now. And
Justice League reaction instead of action.
Yeah.
Equal to Justice League action.
Indeed. So no, that's the thing that gets me about it is even someone who likes more arc-based stuff is sitting here going, well, arc-based stuff alienates me from reading comics. And that's the thing is like arcs were supposed to be the exception. Comics, when they started, everything was a one and done. There's like cliffhangers. There was like that moment, oh, what's going to happen next time? Make sure to pick up that book. Those were there. But the story told usually was fairly self-contained, except for that last little moment to try to get you to come back. When comics started, they were all one and dones. The arc became a thing that evolved from the O. Henry endings.
I think this might be a good place to chime in with this, but how much do people preferring arcs versus one and done stories comes maybe from the notion of they prefer Marvel comic storytelling versus DC comic storytelling? Because Timely was always there, but Marvel as Marvel started in the 60s. I always like to say that Marvel never really had a Silver Age, even though they were birthed near the end of it, because everything they did would become more indicative of like Bronze Age, Modern Age stuff. Marvel Comics, from the beginning, always had more of a forward momentum. Like, even if they have those breaks in the story, there's always a characterization through line that gets picked up for decades. And DC, it took them a long time to adapt their stories to work that way. It took them into the 70s before that really happened. So, like...
Yeah, I mean, certainly. The thing is, Marvel was conceived as a universe,
Yeah.
and DC was not. You want to know a little fun factoid that I found out about DC?
What?
The very first time, it was in like the 50s or early 60s, that Batman and Superman appeared on a book together. They were on the cover together for the very first time. In that issue, Batman and Superman did not meet. And, like, that is perfectly representative of a completely different problem in comic books, which is bullshit, deceptive-ass covers. But that's an entirely different issue. I just find that little factoid. Like, that's the perfect metaphor for DC's not really being conceived of as a universe, though, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Marvel, like, everybody's in New York City, goddammit. Everybody. They had to invent teams specifically not to be in New York City because of how crowded New York City got with goddamn superheroes.
And every couple of years, you see Marvel launch some kind of new event that ends with, okay, now we will have superhero teams all across the country, and then it all seems to get focused in one specific area before they do it again.
I don't know. I've always felt that DCs were more worldly heroes, like, you know, everybody got their own city kind of thing, whereas Marvel did always seem to be...
No, that's what I'm saying. Marvel always has that... No matter how much they attempt to spread out, they're always fixated in one location for a few years.
Yeah, but you said Marvel and DC, though.
Oh, no. I meant, like, Marvel has this tendency, like, they launch an event, and then the whole point of the event is, okay, now we'll have superheroes all over the country, and then after that event, it's suddenly focusing on one specific location before they do that all over again.
Yeah, I agree. It's ridiculous. I find it just hilarious how, like, I have no idea how there's crime in New York City. There's got to be like there's like, here's my breakdown for New York city blocks in the Marvel universe. So you got your coffee shop on the corner, you got a little Asian grocery, and then you got your Jewish deli. Then you got your superhero hangout for the D-list team, and then you got your pawn shop, and then you got your superhero hangout for the C-list team, then you got the supervillain secret lair, then you got, like, there's got to be at least two superheroes on every city block in the Marvel New York City, right?
This is why Daredevil, Spider-Man, and Johnny Storm are best friends.
Right? It just, like, makes sense that they'd all hang out. And, like... It's so weird that Marvel was conceived of as a universe, and yet DC's universe just feels so much more natural in a weird way. Like, you just... I don't know, I just have an easier time in my head picturing those characters hanging out together.
Yeah, they're like
just
godlike.
as friends.
Like, you just see them together. Because I have this, like, godlike image of the Justice League all united in my head.
Yeah, and, like, not even, like, united as heroes, just hanging out as friends. Like,
that's what I mean. Like, just, like, together.
At least in the modern sense, though, right? Like, I wouldn't really necessarily have had that if we didn't have all that DC animated universe stuff growing up.
Yeah,
true.
That's definitely...
I just read Trinity #1, which just came out this week, and it's like Batman and Wonder Woman going to Clark Kent's house for dinner is the entire issue, man. It's kind of awesome.
I mean, there's that episode of Justice League where Superman and I think Martian Manhunter are hanging out at Clark's parents' house for Christmas.
Yep.
There's that one episode of Justice League Unlimited where they're at, like, some, like, diner, and, like, Superman gets possessed by a dead man.
Oh, that happens in Justice League Unlimited, too. And then also there's an episode of Batman Brave and the Bold where after saving the day, Batman, Wonder Woman, and Superman are just hanging out at a fast food place eating hamburgers. It's kind of hilarious.
DC universe. I want that DC universe on film. That'd be awesome.
Who operates the cafeteria in like in the Watchtower? Like, who operates like the cafeteria in Justice League Unlimited?
I assume one of the speedsters.
And I mean, this has always been kind of like my ideal picture of a DC universe. Like, there's a story called there's a Deadshot story where Deadshot is killing a bunch of criminals in a specific subsector of Star City, and Green Arrow shows up, and they have, like, a small fight. But when they actually get to the issue at hand of, like, why is Deadshot in this neighborhood, the issue just turns into Deadshot and Green Arrow sitting at a diner having lunch together talking about their problems. Like, shit like that is why I enjoy the DC universe.
Oh, that's so
right.
Cool.
And, like, this is getting kind of far away from the topic, but just... How did we get to the universe thing? I forget.
Cities? New York City?
Yeah. It's so weird that you think of, we got there because we were talking about the arc-based thing of Marvel being conceived of a universe.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that happened, and I think that's why it happened, is because we put all these people together. Now let's see how they interact, interact, and naturally you want to be able to tell stories and jump off other things that other people are doing, so you can use the same villain for multiple stories and stuff like that with different characters. That's a very natural, makes sense thing to do. But importantly, even when they started doing that, it wasn't a huge thing. Continuity wasn't like this big, daunting thing. People didn't feel the need to connect all these things together so strongly to make it all work. If people called them on their bullshit in the letters pages, they just made something up there. They didn't bother to put it in the story.
Now, importantly, though, I feel like a lot of that continuity thing worked better before because every character had less books, and
True.
we had less trouble with writers retroactively altering things for their sake.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a big problem with certain runs in the 90s and the 2000s is that writers want to leave their stamp on these corporate characters, so they just dismiss everything that came beforehand for the sake of what they want to write. And fine, whatever, writers should be able to do what they want to, but continuity was never a hurdle to overcome if people just understood their function within the history of writing a character. And that seems to have been lost lately, because everyone wants to write these big epic scaling 60-issue things, and they never really can with corporate characters, so they go off and do their own things over at Image and stuff. And so, like, we've got this weird notion of hang on to these couple writers and let them tell, like, 100-issue stories. And then everyone else, like smaller people like Jeff Lemire, will be fine doing, like, one-and-done stuff.
It's bizarre. It's such a weird blending of industry think with the culture of writing and then the history of the characters. It's all just this weird hodgepodge car crash, right? I don't know what to make of, like, how it happened. All I know is I think it's creating stagnation in the... I don't even want to say in the industry, though that too. I think it's creating stagnation in the art form.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there's a difficulty in trying to force a writer to stay past their prime, and then there's a difficulty in forcing a writer to truncate what they want to do. And so, if there was just more opportunity for these characters to function independently of universe-scaled events, maybe this wouldn't be as much of a problem. But this is especially a Marvel thing, right? Like, if every writer didn't have to worry about the next impending crossover, maybe the stagnation wouldn't feel as bad.
Yeah. I don't know, man. It's one of those things that scares me because, like, I don't want to be one of those guys that predicts the end of the art form. I don't think it's ever going to end, but I think it can definitely be hugely impacted and to its detriment by this kind of mentality. Mm-hmm. And it worries me seeing that kind of coming because, like, while comics aren't perfect right now, they're still pretty damn good. We are in still the platinum age of comics, as a lot of people have dubbed it. It's hard to argue that you might like Golden Age or Silver Age in tone better, but and Bronze Age too. But it's really hard to make an argument that the overall quality of storytelling and the damn beauty of art in these books over the last 15 to 20 years of comics hasn't been phenomenal. You look at the history of the industry since the 30s and 40s, and the storytelling has gotten better and better and really has challenged to show itself as a true art form, and then the art wanted to do as much as it could to catch up with that, and it started embracing new technologies. So I think that name, the Platinum Age, really is earned. but I'm afraid that it's ending and that it's just getting too big to sustain itself in the way that it's working right now.
I think that might be a bit too idealized way of thinking about it, because remember a lot of the good stuff like Grant Morrison Batman and Jeff Johns Green Lantern and Gail Simone Wonder Woman and Daredevil by Bendis. Like, a lot of this good stuff is remembered and it's amazing and we all love it, but it comes on the heels of hundreds upon hundreds of issues of near industry destroying shit. Like, the early 2000s were not a good time for anyone. The Ultimate Universe, pretty much a couple years in, just died. Like, there's certainly this past 15, 20 years of great art being produced, and definitely art that I think rivals anything that's ever come in comic history, but not in mass over the things that are awful.
Well, I don't know. I don't think that that's ever going to be the case for anything. God, I can never remember what the damn term he used was. We had Alec used to come on the show a lot, and he had a name for it, and I cannot recall, but it was basically this rule that the majority of everything that comes out in a genre or a medium is gonna be passable to garbage, but it's the exceptions that are gonna be great. And I have such an easy time picking out the great that I think it overshadows, in just how good it is, I think it overshadows the majority of the bad.
But I don't
like, you know, you can have 1 million for one more days. It doesn't hold a candle to my ability to enjoy Grant Morrison's Batman.
But I don't think the general history would look at it that way. Because, like, I think both Marvel and DC had more good going on all at once in the 70s and 80s than anything we've got right now. That's not to say there aren't things being made now that are far superior to 70s and 80s runs, but I think it'd be very hard to make the case that the 2000s to the 10s have been this monumental shift in quality, because there's just not quite as much good as there has been.
I don't think it's a quantity thing. I think it's a quality thing.
And I agree. I think the quality is fine. I think it's just a matter of, like, the quantity is going to factor into how we look at these things historically.
No, because it's, you know... Alright, my prime example for this, then, is... Honestly, it's the same argument I make when people talk about Batman being bad at his job because the criminals keep escaping Arkham. And I always ask everyone that makes that argument the same question. You ever heard of Crash and Burn? Steve, you're the big Batman guy here. You ever heard of Crash and Burn? Don't Google that shit.
Tell me off my head what you mean as far as Batman goes.
They're two Batman villains. Have you ever heard of Crash and Burn?
No.
Because they were only in 2 issues, and then they got locked up in Arkham and apparently either cured or were never a problem again. So they were just 2. They got.
I want to read their series. Come on.
It was 2 issues. They got 2 issues in a Bronze Age era Batman comic series, and then they were never heard from again. And it's not that it was a bad story. It's not that it was poorly drawn story or anything like that. It was just an average everyday comic book. And so I think the quality, the things that are of the highest quality, get remembered historically rather than the things that are just okay or the things that are bad.
Okay,
we remember the exceptions. We remember the things on the far ends. We remember the things that were god-awful, and we remember the things that were brilliant. And I think that there are far more brilliant things coming out now than there are god-awful things.
Okay. Well, I think it's just absolutely wrong to say that there are more brilliant things coming out than there are god-awful things, because, I mean, there are a lot of god-awful things. But
over the last 15 years...
Yeah, there's been a lot of god-awful things. But, like,
I have a really hard time agreeing with that, because when I say god-awful, I mean, like, actually horrible, did terrible damage to the characters and the history.
Okay, well, One More Day is the easy example, but, like,
Yeah.
does anyone remember Secret Invasion and Dark Reign and Identity Crisis and Heroes Reborn and that weird period where Iron Man was Secretary of Defense and all those Avengers stories where Bendis just killed numerous civilians and superhero teams that have been going on for years, and that awkward period where Captain Britain was not Captain Britain anymore, or that time...
See, I'm not, to be fair, you're a Marvel guy, I'm a DC guy. I'm not remembering the majority of that. Like, everyone, the easy example, is, other than One More Day, would have just said the New 52, Ian.
But see, and this would be my thing, right? Like, we don't like it, but to the general public, Scott Snyder's Batman is one of the best runs on Batman. Now, I think that's bullshit, but to the general public, that's the case. Now, if you talk to the general comic book public, and if you look at like community boards and podcasts and stuff that subscribe to this mentality of Scott Snyder's Batman being one of the best, that doesn't hold a candle to all of the other things that were perceived as god-awful of the New 52. So that's 5 years that are historically going to be seen as a dark age of nothing good being produced, despite a couple things being perceived as really good. And that's just my point.
That's fair. Again, I think we tend to remember the extremes, and I don't think there are enough extremes of just plain bad, or god awful. I don't think there are enough extremes of god awful compared to just exceptional over the last 15 years or so.
Well, we'll just disagree, because I think that's just wrong.
I don't know, man, because you got Grant Morrison's Batman in there, you got Jeff Johns' Green Lantern,
Grant Morrison's Batman in the same period you had Return of Ra's al Ghul.
Yeah, but I don't even remember Return of Ra's al Ghul
That doesn't mean
much.
it wasn't dog shit.
Yeah, but it's not like. But the thing is, it doesn't stick with you.
Yeah, but
that means it was just bad. It wasn't so awful that it sticks with you and becomes a stain on the character.
But like, there are plenty of examples of stains on characters. It's particularly when it comes to Batman, like all the shit Tim Drake's been through lately. Like, it is a stain on the character that his name was not Tim Drake anymore in the New 52. It is a stain on the character that we had this weird period of Bruce Wayne just doing everything he's experienced in Grant Morrison's run all over again. It is a stain on the character that Tony Stark's parents are no longer his parents anymore.
I can't disagree with it, but I don't feel like it's gonna affect things long term.
Maybe. I don't know.
I don't like Scott Snyder's Batman, but really it doesn't affect the character long term. It just kept the character at the exact same, like, it took him back 5 years and then kept him in the same place for 5 years. So we just had a stagnant Batman for 5 years with Scott Snyder's Batman, as bad as it was.
A stagnant Batman that is now perceived as this brilliant reimagining that everyone loves.
Stagman.
Yeah, it's annoying. Stagman. Thank you.
But like,
I don't know, Raska, you come in here because I feel like Steve and I are just butting heads and we're not going to get anywhere.
Well, you must resolve your conflict, guys.
No, like it's this weird impasse because, yeah, I mean, we are like literally completely contradicting each other, and it's really funny because I'm just like, I don't know, man. At that point, it is a matter of personal taste. Do you feel that the last 15 years of comic books have been more good than dog shit? And I think the answer is yes. But maybe that's just me. I don't know.
The optimist.
Yeah. God, can you imagine? That's pretty dark. That says more about you, Steve, than it does about me, that I'm the optimist in this situation.
Well, I do hate everything, so...
Exactly, see?
To bring this back around to the long-form versus short-form thing, the last 15 years have seen a rise in comic books adopting more of that decompressed format. Like, and I blame Bendis for this. As much as I have a love-hate relationship with him, it is his fault that everyone needs to turn a 5-issue story into a 12-issue story. And it's also partly the fault of Marvel's bankruptcy and such, that comics' image was hurt, and we need to, like, do these long, drawn-out, event-based try and keep a consistent reader flow, don't take any risk kind of mentality that we have. So, and as bad as that is, the annoying thing about that is, because of that decompression, we have 20 issues of Daredevil outside of his costume, which might be the best run on Daredevil ever.
It's weird, and like, I try to think of this, and I came up with a couple examples off the top of my head. But I can name you, like, tons of really great comic books that are in arcs, right?
Yeah.
I can name you, you know, I can go off a list. I can read all the trades on my shelf. What I can't do is give you lists of great one-and-done stories, but I know that there are. The only one, and like, importantly, not just one-and-done, but one-and-done in the standard 22 to 24-page story, not extra-sized, oversized issues.
Yeah.
That's really fucking hard for me to do. And I racked my brain about it, and I thought I had two, but I realized one of them was an oversized issue. So I only have one, but I think I should get to count it for two because it was a backup. So it was extra short.
And, like, and some of that even comes down to the idea of the people that prefer to read everything week to week in single issue format versus buying things in trade. The idea of a one and done issue that is great means more for you if you're stuck month to month reading one story arc for like half your year.
Yeah, and that's just like, you know, I'm really enjoying Greg Rucka's Wonder Woman, but you wouldn't know it talking about my reviews because I keep making the same point, which is 2 stories in one book, week to week, is fucking hard to follow.
I know, that's why I stopped picking it up. I'm just waiting for both arcs to end now and just reading it after that.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's just, okay, so one week you're reading this stuff that's going on currently, the next week you're reading Wonder Woman Origin, the next week you're reading the stuff going on currently in the present, the next week you're reading Wonder Woman Origin again. And that's just too much back and forth. Just give me 2 Wonder Woman books. I'll buy both of them.
Just make one of them a miniseries. Why couldn't you just have Wonder Woman and Wonder Woman Year 1, Part 1 of 6 or something?
I don't know, because we just did Legend of Wonder Woman, and it would literally be the exact same thing.
So the fuck what? This is DC Comics. They've had 3 or 4 books for one character doing the exact same thing several times.
True. No, it's just, that's the thing, is like, I read that, I'm like, God, why? Why would you do that? And it just makes it really, really frustrating to read things. And that's why I'm enjoying Grant Morrison's 18 Days so much, is it's doing the Sandman thing, where we do, you know, it's a big overarching story that we're telling. You know that getting into it. But every couple issues, we take a minute, and we just, you know, oh, let's look at these guys and look at their past, and we just get a story with them. And, like, it's just told through the lens, it's, like, bookmarked with the war, with the battle. That's fucking brilliant storytelling in comic books.
This video is going to be marked with distinction after distinction, just because I feel like we need to keep pulling them. But another important distinction here might be the idea of comic book characters as long-running properties versus indie characters and indie books as begin and end wherever the hell you want them to. Because I think people like Grant Morrison are allowed to do that over in other companies and through other projects because...
Importantly, though, it's not written by Grant Morrison, plotted by...
No, it's not written by him. Although he had a thing, an 18 Days thing prior to the current 18 Days thing that he did write. But...
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, the way it's written, it's just called, like, it's weird. You can't go to your comic book... I'm sorry, this is totally distracting, but you can't go to your comic book store and put 18 Days on your pull list. They won't be able to find it on Diamond. You have to ask for Grant Morrison's 18 Days.
It's like Lee Daniels the Butler. No, not that Butler movie, the Lee Daniels Butler movie.
Right. So anyway, yeah, but it is important to mention that it's not written by Grant Morrison.
Yeah, although it is really fucking good. But anyway, because with characters like Batman, Superman, and such, when they were invented, they were not conceived as these characters are going to last for 100 years. Now they are. Now it is all about the notion of how do we keep these people around and around and around and around, and so it becomes really difficult to do one-and-done stories that DC approves of or Marvel approves of, while at the same time being allowed on the book long enough to feel like you made an impact in a 100-year legacy.
And, like, I don't know when that started, because...
Probably 80s,
would you say...
after Dark Knight Returns, I think that might start...
No, because I'd say Denny O'Neil made his impact on Green Lantern and Green Arrow.
But he didn't do that with the intention of, I have to be the one to leave the mark. He just did...
No, I agree. I'm just wondering when the writers started leaving an impact. Like when we started to remember the writer over the character.
Late 60s, early 70s, probably.
Yeah, and so that's just weird, because, like, besides Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, who remembers fucking Golden Age writers? And of course Steve does, but
and I mean, I wish we could. Like, I mean, there's so much good classic stuff that doesn't get referenced anymore. Creators that have long been forgotten, despite the fact that they were massive influences on the way we see the characters now. Like, it's really tricky thinking about comics as a corporate thing, because so much of what makes them great is these personal stories of, like, poor writers that didn't have anything else to do, and this was the highlight of their existence.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to add to that. Just, yes, you are correct. Man. Rascal, you're too quiet. You throw in while I consider Steve's point.
Speak! That counts.
Yeah, that was a full-fledged statement.
You didn't say what language.
There was
for you to figure
and
out.
it was
I'm not here to
made.
teach you languages you don't know. I'm not here for that.
I don't know, like, Rascal, you are the outsider in this conversation. Like, I'm curious on your perspective in it, though.
Well, narrow it down and throw something at me.
Okay, how did you feel about the idea of the writer leaving an impact on these long-running characters, as opposed to just letting the characters run on them?
It's weird. You walk a line of, like... There's like a... Okay, so it kind of... It depends on how... If you look at it as like a collaboration. Like, if you as a writer look at all of the runs on a certain character as all like this big collaborative work to make up like the history of this character. But like I can see how there would be certain people that wouldn't have... they wouldn't think of it that way, and they would think of it very much as their own, potentially. Mm-hmm. And it's weird, because, like, I would kind of be on the side of taking the character only places where it would naturally go based on where he's already been.
Yeah, and I think that's a big problem, is because a lot of writers don't want to do that. They want to ignore whatever the person did before them. And having read Scott Snyder's Batman, if someone just gave me the keys to Batman at that point, I would be very sympathetic to that point of view. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people that I totally understand that thinking. But at the same time, it is I think I'm going to kind of adapt something Stan Lee said, which is every comic book is somebody's first comic book. I think every writer's run on a character is somebody's favorite run on that character. And you should be able, even if you hate it, to be respectful of that and just realize I might not like it, but this is what happened.
Yeah.
And I've got to deal with that and move on.
Well, and importantly, there are runs that are famous for completely retooling a character and ignoring everything in the past and making that character matter again. Like, Frank Miller's Daredevil is not Stan Lee's Daredevil or Marv Wolfman's Daredevil. Ghost Rider by Howard Mackie is not the original Ghost Rider at all. Like, there are good, famous instances of characters being completely rewritten, and now they're more famous for it.
And it's interesting because there are times where there are examples of characters where they kind of were, like, it seems like they were built from the ground up all over again, but then they're still completely grounded in the continuity that kind of bogged them down.
Yeah.
And you know where I'm going to go with that?
Where's that?
Hal Jordan.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say Dennis O'Neil Question, but yeah.
Yeah, Hal Jordan, though, is, like, entirely that, you know. Everything that Johns did with that character was based off of this stuff DC had done to the character in the 90s that everybody hated. And he didn't ignore it. He didn't, you know, it was my evil twin his way out of it. He embraced the fuck out of the continuity, pulled a hat trick, and made it all even better.
Yeah, I mean, he did a really risky thing, and it turned out to be the seminal thing on that character's legacy and in that entire section of DC Universe's mythos.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, it's impossible to overstate Jeff Johns' contribution to the idea of Green Lanterns.
Oh, certainly. I've read Green Lantern stuff before Jeff Johns, and it's not even kind of as good. I can see, the best thing I can say about stuff with Green Lantern before Jeff Johns gets a hold of the property is I can see what Jeff Johns loved about it.
The original Kyle stuff's good.
At times.
That's fair.
Not
great.
It's got its moments. Everything's got its moments.
Yeah. The whole thing with the fear manifestation and shit, that's cool. Anyway.
Yeah. Just, it's interesting to look at the way that writers get onto that thing. And so, yeah, I understand that viewpoint of I want to tell my story and be able to leave my mark on this character. But at the same time, if you really want to leave your mark on a character, I think there needs to be, this is going to sound weird, kind of an unselfish motivation behind that too, because if you want to leave your mark on the character, what you don't want people to remember is that you wrote that character for this period. What you really want them to remember is the story you were writing with the character. The story needs to come before yourself. And so, as brilliant as Jeff Johns' work on Green Lantern was, he's not what makes that stuff work. What makes that stuff work is that he embraced the past of the character to make it better, to make an insult better. And he took it to its next logical step and made it great.
And this is where the brilliance of the one-shot, one-and-done story comes over the idea of the run, because it's very hard, if not impossible, to be remembered entirely for your contribution to a character if it's just one issue. And so the fact that you get to write one issue means that the writing has more incentive to be memorable and good.
Certainly. And, to be fair, sticking with Green Lantern here, my favorite story in all of John's run on that book, nearly 10-year arc, is one of the first things he wrote after Rebirth, which is Flight. I fucking love that story. It's a single issue. It's not even a full single issue either. It's a single issue that just informs you this is Hal Jordan's background. He was a kid that just wanted to be his dad. And I love that. It's the most touching thing. It completely tells you everything you need to know about the character. I love that story.
Yeah.
Dave Gibbons' art, or no, not Dave Gibbons. What's the name of the guy that just died? I feel bad.
Comic-wise, who died?
Everyone was making the videos about him and stuff.
Fucking everyone died in 2016, man.
Wait, are you talking about Darwin Cook?
Yeah,
Darwin Cook, yes.
Yeah, Darwin Cook did the art for it. Not his best work.
It's not distinctly Darwin Cook, no.
Nah. But anyway, like, no, just, I love Green Lantern Flight. It is a beautiful, beautiful story with Hal Jordan, and it stands out as a fantastic one-and-done story. So Jeff Johns did both. He could do both. He just got kind of stuck in doing these gigantic frickin' arcs that sum totaled into 3 volumes of Omnibuy. Jesus fucking Christ. At that point, yeah, digital over print comics, guys.
As far as just great single issues go, that are not oversized, Iron Man 500.1, because back when Marvel was doing the .1 thing, which was dumb, but Iron Man 500.1 is after Tony gets his bleeding edge armor and everything, and the issue's called What Was It Like, What Happened, and What's It Like Now, and it's the whole issue is Tony's going to a church for an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. He gets up and he just starts talking about what it was like being drunk and how his father's impact made him drunk and what it was like to be a kid that's the exact opposite of who he is now. It's a story with no action scenes and just Tony talking to a crowd of people, and it's one of the greatest stories of Iron Man ever.
Yeah, I love stuff like that. You can pull me in, and you can just be incredibly touching. And I think the solution here is not to stop doing arc-based storytelling and go to all single one-and-done stories again. I think the writers just need to be able to know when to take a goddamn break and just let us breathe with a single one-and-done story. And I was talking about the single issue, and I'm glad I thought of Flight just in the process of this conversation, but I really, really like, and I know you don't really care for it, Steve, I really, really like the War Games story arc in Batman. I think it's a really, really interesting, event crossover for those books. After it was all over, there was a backup in an issue of Detective called In the Dark. And it's just a story about Batman trying to find a kidnapped child. And that's it. And it's like 90% narration, there's a tiny bit of dialogue, and the rest of it's just told with art. And goddamn, it's freaking beautiful.
Batman's got lots of those great, like just one and done stories that no one remembers because they aren't part of like some bigger run. Peter Milligan had a run on Batman before he did Hellblazer, I think. And his was mostly like weird magic based. He wrote Dark Knight, Dark City. But he had an issue that was literally... Oh, it wasn't him. It was Jim Starlin. Sorry. Never mind. Jim Starlin wrote this. But Jim Starlin had an issue of Batman that was just... There was a serial killer on the loose, and Batman's tracking him, and Batman thinks he's found the guy that did it, but it turns out it was just Batman's own bias to try and get the case solved. And by the end of the issue, someone else dies, and Batman has no idea who the serial killer is, and that's it. That's the end of the story.
Do you think that people would remember these better if DC released just volumes of one-and-done backup stories and stuff?
They do sometimes.
I've never found one.
DC likes to do those like theme-based paperbacks or hardcovers where like, here's Batman of the 70s, or here's Batman versus this villain, and they have some big stories and some just like classic one-and-dones. They very rarely are any good, though.
Yeah, I'm just talking about, like, instead of doing it with a theme, it's just like, okay, here's a bunch of Batman one-and-dones that have nothing to do with each other whatsoever, except for the fact that they're short, single, one-off stories. Because, like, that's a bedtime book, That's how you make a kid fall in love with Batman, is you just read them one of those every night before
I agree.
bed.
I feel like they should do that. At the same time, there's really lots of indirect ways that happens. Like pretty much every issue of John Byrne's Superman is a one and done. So if you just buy those, you basically got 10 volumes of one and done Superman stories.
No, but it would be nice to be able to just go and buy a volume of Batman trade that is you know it's got no overarching thing. It's just something that you can sit down and read like each story would be a chapter.
It would be really cool, and maybe this is just wishful thinking, but it'd be really cool if they brought in writers to do this. So like Dennis O'Neil comes in, and he said, and the instructions are just, here, find a collection of like 6 one-and-done stories in Batman's history, and put them in a collection, and all you do is just like write in a foreword why you picked these issues and if they meant anything to you or something.
That'd be cool.
I would love the hell out of that.
As far as one-and-dones go, that's why I love Tales from the Green Lantern Corps so much.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my favorite DC animated movie is Emerald Knights.
It's a really good movie.
It really fucking is.
It really is. I like
massive plot hole that no one ever talks about. Because, like, they're sitting there literally watching the sun, waiting for Crota to show up. And they just keep telling each other these stories. And then Crota shows up and they just start, like, blasting him with their rings. And they're like, this isn't working, we need a plan. You know when would have been a good time to come up with a plan? It's when you were sitting around looking at the sun telling each other stories.
No. We have to come up with a plan and have our fun.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. You ever see Reservoir Dogs? Because it's almost the exact situation that the dude describes in Reservoir Dogs. It's like, so 6 criminals try to bust a bank, and they get caught by the police, and they're all sitting in lockup trying to figure out what the fuck went wrong. And then one guy goes, hey, you know when we were supposed to be planning the bank heist and we were all telling stories and joking around the whole goddamn time? Maybe we should have actually been planning the bank heist. Anyway, regardless of that.
In regards to one-and-dones versus long-form storytelling, both of us gave one example of one-and-done issues we both love. Rasco, is there one specific issue of anything that you love?
Oh, hold on. Give me a second. God damn.
And then also, for all of us, just one particular run that we all love that isn't something obvious like Grant Morrison's Batman or Jeff Johns' Green Lantern or Dennis O'Neil Iron Man.
Okay.
Something more obscure than that, please.
Sure, and I'll try to do something that I haven't talked about already.
Wait, what are all the things we're supposed to be thinking of right now?
Just think of a one and done, and then think of an arc that you like.
Yeah. As far as arc goes, that is nothing obvious.
I'm gonna pick Coming of Galactus.
Coming of Galactus.
Oh, nice.
And then my individual issue will be Vengeance of Bane.
Nice. I do love Vengeance of Bane. That is a fucking great book.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I've talked about one and dones. For me, an arc, it's just a single arc, and I really do love it to death. Steve and I did a video on it.
Boy.
Riddle me that. It's just such a good fucking Riddler story. It is hands down my favorite. I think it was just this brilliant fucking arc with him. Love Riddle Me That.
Yeah, that's a really good arc. I like it.
I convinced you.
As for me, a particular arc that I love is Dan McGregor's Black Panther, Panther's Rage, which is Jungle Action numbers 6 through 18 or 19. But it's just the original Black Panther ongoing, where Black Panther comes back to Wakanda, and it's all about how coloniality mentality and whether or not Black Panther has become like a sympathizer of the outside world, and like the internal struggles of the Wakandan nation and like extremist factions and stuff. It's just a really fucking good story, and the fact that Black Panther had a story that good right out of the gate is mind-blowing.
Cool shit. Just thought of another like longer where it's a whole series that I really love, and I talk about it all the time. And it was something brilliant in the New 52, was All-Star Western with Jonah Hex and Amadeus Arkham.
I know I read the first few issues of that. I know you keep talking about it. At some point I need to go back through all of it, and we should talk about it.
It's like when Amadeus Arkham and Jonah Hex are together, it's pretty fun, cool, clever writing. And then they just pull all the stops out for like the last, I want to say 16 to 12 issues and have Booster Gold show up. And then Jonah Hex is in present day DC Universe and it's amazing. It's just fucking amazing.
Part of the reason I never went back and like read all of that is that All-Star Western is supposed to be a spiritual sequel to their Jonah Hex run, and I never read that. So I want to like go through all that in order at some point.
I've never even read their Jonah Hex run that was in Old 52 before that, and I just don't care, dude.
No, that's fair.
It's so weird, because I came to that book in the most roundabout way possible, because I just, holy shit, an Amadeus Arkham story, you never get those, so that's why I picked it up.
And I mean, a lot of this goes to like our difference of like you're more individual issue based. You just pick up an issue and you go for it. But when I need to get into something, I need to like get into it from the very beginning.
Yeah, like you have to go find the very first issue. Like you have to go to your comics store and look through all the back issues till you get to the 40s and find the first comic, and then pay thousands of dollars for it and go from there, right?
Yep, pretty much. I will not. I refuse to read the first issue of something brand new that was just printed unless I go back and waste all my money on every single thing that came before it. Waste my entire summer going through everything. Took me 2 years, and I've read every single issue of Iron Man ever. Just saying.
Let me just posit something to you, Steve, and I just want you to consider this point. How much you want to bet that the person writing the book, the new book that's just come out that you're doing all this homework for, didn't fucking read all that shit?
Well, fuck them, alright? Damn, I did my homework. You're the writer. You should have been doing your homework, damn it. You have free, unlimited access to this information. I paid for this shit. Come on.
Like, I just want to really throw that out there to you, Steve. They probably didn't read everything. Not everybody is Grant Morrison.
Yeah.
And even Grant Morrison didn't reread everything before writing Batman, though you believe he did.
He didn't reread everything, but he's already read everything, so it's alright.
Well, he misremembered Damian's origins, so...
That's okay. That's just because his version's better.
No, actually, I've got this really cool fan theory that I quite like to make his mistake work even better. And that is, like, you just ignore the whole thing with Batman getting raped by Talia. You just ignore that part. I remember when the whole Batgirl controversy over, you know, the Killing Joke and stuff was going on. I saw someone, I can't remember who it was, someone was like, if Batman got raped in a story, would we remember it so fondly? Yes, we would, because everybody loves Batman and Son. Anyway.
Nightwing got raped, no one seems to remember that either.
Yeah. Anyway, so, like, my fan theory on Damian, at least in Old 52, I have no idea if this still holds up. My fan theory on Damian is he was not the child that we see at the end of... Is it Bride of the Demon or Son of the Demon? Looking to you for this one.
Son of the Demon. It's Son of the Demon, Bride of the Demon, Birth of the Demon.
Yeah, okay, so Damian... We see a baby Damian Wayne at the end of Son of the Demon that Talia gives up for adoption because she doesn't want him raised like she was. I believe that the Damian we see in Batman and Son until the end of Batman Inc., where he dies, is in fact not that Damian, but is just the first clone of that Damian. And he doesn't know it.
Oh, shit.
Right? It's a good-ass fan theory, right? Especially because, like, we see her cloning him later, so it totally works.
It might happen. I don't know if New 52 contradicts that. I don't think it does.
Yeah.
We very rarely go back to that original Birth of Damian story.
Yeah. I don't know. Just throw that out there for you. Anyway, I think that we're pretty close to getting done. Does anyone have any final points on arc-based versus short story, like, one and done? And, you know, I shouldn't say that I'm, like, fully one and done. I do like short arc too. My problem is the 10 issue and longer arc, I think, is my biggest issue. The thing that you have to read from issue 1 until the series is over. Those are my bigger problems. I don't mind 2 to 3 issue arcs. I just want to throw that point out there. Those I still consider short form storytelling.
Okay.
I feel like we just need balance. Like, I love the way Tom King's doing things. You get one issue that's pretty much self-contained, but that catapults an arc. Then you're in that arc for like 3 or 4 issues. Then you get a one and done that epilogues it, and then next story arc. There's no reason everyone, like Scott Snyder needs to do every single story is a year's worth of comics. It's just better if the universe can, like, expand and contract based on the merits of when it should expand and when it should contract, as opposed to artificially inflating or deflating it.
If you put the universe in a cup, the universe becomes the cup.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I just, like I say, I think Gaiman pretty much hit the nail on the head with Sandman. It's the perfect, like, not only in storytelling, but it is like the perfect comic book run to me, because it does, it takes the time to let you breathe, and it uses those breather, one and done, perfectly stand on their own stories to inform what's going to happen later. That's perfect. That's just perfect storytelling right there. In comic book form to me. And I know he didn't invent it, but I think he perfected it, goddammit. Rasco, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Not really.
No? Yeah, this was like, I knew, Rasco, you'd be a little lighter on this one, since you're not as into comics, but it was good having you here anyway for your limited perspective.
But we'll be back with a passion next episode, because I got the topic.
Yeah, what are we talking about next week, Rasco?
Okay, next week we're talking about the David Cronenberg film, The Brood.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, I could have sworn you were about to say The Fly, and I'm like, no, we already did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be... Oh, really? I didn't realize that's the same director. Cool. Okay, that makes me excited, because I love The Fly, so yay. Maybe Rascal will have picked a good horror movie this time.
I don't know. It's a pretty freaking weird one, but I think it's really good.
Oh, uh-oh. Now I'm worried. Everyone, you know what that means, though. Next week, the first Sunday of October, we're starting up Geeky Gentleman Horror Month, which is quickly followed by Geeky Gentleman History Month, which is then immediately followed by Geeky Gentleman Holiday Month. So,
wow, Holiday Month.
Yep, prepare your anus for the theme months, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages.
Wow, I remember my first theme month. That was last year.
Yeah.
My theme months were cray-cray. I remember Krampus. Mm-hmm. Watch that movie.
Yep.
I did Krampus, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I'm the Politician.
And I'm the Squampus.
And we are your Geeky Gentlemen. And we will be discussing things in either short one-and-done stories or arc-based things, depending on our moods.